There is a beautiful lady expecting a baby, and that lady is Mother Namibia. So this beautiful lady, we must take care of her to ensure that best doctors and specialists are there to ensure that the baby is properly delivered. And that baby is free and independent of this land.
The president of SWAPO, NUJOMA, embarks on another phase of the Namibian liberation struggle, the struggle for the ballot box. The people of Namibia, Africa's last colony, are preparing themselves for the first free and fair elections in this country. The elections will lead to independence from South Africa after more than a century of colonial domination. Before the First World War, the Germans tried to forcefully subjugate the inhabitants of the territory. The Germans, however, were defeated by the South Africans during this war. The South Africans in turn took control over Southwest Africa, as the territory was called. But to the inhabitants, the South Africans were not liberators. They became another foreign occupational force. They also introduced the hated apartheid system, ignoring the sacred trust bestowed upon them to develop the people and the territory until they can govern themselves. Subsequently, in the eyes of the world, South Africa betrayed this trust. That is why, in 1971, the United Nations revoked the mandate and declared South Africa's presence illegal in Namibia. That is also why the elections will be held under United Nations supervision and control, according to United Nations Security Council Resolution 435 of 1978. Over 10 years since its adoption, the Namibian Peace Plan is finally implemented on April 1st, 1989. It is expected that SWAPO will benefit from 30 years of unwavering struggle against the South African colonialism in Namibia, of which 23 years were dominated by an armed confrontation against the South African occupying forces. Opposing SWAPO in the elections is a group of parties which participated in the South African-sponsored interim government. That assembly was operating against the resolutions of the United Nations, which was legally responsible for the administration of the territory after 1971. The parties have the added task of distancing themselves from charges of collaboration with the colonial regime. They started doing just that at the last meeting of the so-called interim government.
So those who are saying that they are happy to see us going, they are wasting their time because originally we planned to go when matters of this nature appear on the table.
I want to say, Mr. Speaker, that I joined my honorable colleague, Mr. Mach, to say that the mischief created in the minds of the people by the men in the house here, that this government was fired, is a lot of nonsense, and everybody knows it. We are going, but we'll be back. We'll be back here.
The next time this chamber will be occupied, it will be filled with democratically elected members of the First Namibian Constituent Assembly. This assembly will be charged with the duty of writing Namibia's first autonomous constitution. The contest which is about to begin will be to obtain a two-thirds majority of seats in this assembly. According to United Nations Resolution 435, those votes will give the majority party the right to pass its own constitution without any opposition. They will be representing the free will of the majority of the 1.5 million people of this country.
But we have committed ourselves to a plan, and we find ourselves bound to that plan. We know that it is not the ideal conditions that we wanted. The ideal conditions that we wanted is in Resolution 385, where the United Nations would have had full control of elections in the country. But we have...
According to Resolution 435, the South African appointed Administrator General will be in charge of this contest. It is regarded as one of the major compromises of the resolution because of South Africa's illegality in Namibia. Also, all South African administrations in Namibia have singled out SWAPO and its supporters for repression. The most important person in this process of transformation, however, will be the Special Representative of the Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Marty Ahtisaari. This is because everybody who's participating in this peace plan, including the Administrator General, will have to perform to his satisfaction. Marty Ahtisaari stepped on Namibian soil to head the operations of the United Nations Transitional Assistance Group, Untitled. To welcome him at the airport was Advocate Louis Pina, Lieutenant General Prem Chand, who will command the Untitled peacekeeping forces, and Abdul Sis, who will head the administrative component of Untitled. Outside the airport complex and in Kadatura, members of various political parties gathered to welcome him and celebrate his arrival, a new era in Namibian history. On this day, deep in the bush of southern Angola, the beginning of this era was marked with a military parade.
This is precisely what we have been fighting, shedding our blood in order to give the Namibian people the opportunity to democratically elect their own government. That means the war has come to an end.
It is obvious that Resolution 435 recognized the existence of war and the presence of repression in Namibia. That is why, before any elections can be held, the plan calls for the cessation of hostilities, the release of all political prisoners and detainees, followed by the repeal of discriminatory and restrictive laws, the return of all refugees, and the withdrawal of South African troops from Namibia.
We were now very busy planning the biggest rally that was held up to 1st of April. There was no rally that would match the one that we were planning for 1st of April, with the result that even when we heard about skirmishes in the north, it was while we were running, doing our work.
On the implementation date of Resolution 435, as if by design, the war started afresh in the north of the country. The situation deteriorated to a point where the peace plan was in the balance.
There's fierce fighting going on in Ovambo right now, especially in eastern and western parts of Ovamboland. Huge groups being engaged in firefights with the police. There's also groups moving down to the Tar Road from Chikangu to Ondangwa. And our information is that they intend setting up an ambush and also make use of a B-10 cannon in that specific ambush.
Here was a battle between the guerrillas and Kufut.
What exactly were the guerrillas coming to do here?
They were told to organize themselves, to prepare for themselves to wait for UNTAC people to confine them to the bases or to hand over their weapons. We know that they didn't come just on Sunday or Saturday, but they have been already here before the implementation of Resolution 435. They thought the war is over, and that's what they told the people, local people here. The war is over. We are told not to shoot any South African defense force or Kufut or so on. We are here only waiting for UNTAC people to tell us where to go.
Planned combatants were entitled in the first place to be in their own country because they are Namibians. They could not have invaded their country. They have been inside in the country. They have been fighting inside in the country for the past 22 years. Secondly, they were entitled under 435 to be confined to base and monitored by UNTAC. And that's precisely what their Commander-in-Chief, President NUJOMA, instructed them to do. That's what they were seeking to do, and they were attacked by South Africa.
Ahtisaari strongly disagreed with that interpretation of the United Nations document.
I know that there has been interest from SWAPO's side to keep their people in the bases if there are some in the country. There was even a proposal in early parts of the negotiating process from our side, from UN side, to put them, if we found some here, into designated locations. But that was never accepted by South Africa, and it has never been accepted in the negotiating process.
The Geneva Protocol, signed in August 1988 by South Africa, Cuba, and Angola, sought to clarify the uncertainty on this point.
It does not talk about planned combatants inside in Namibia. It talked about those planned combatants that would be north of the Namibian border, outside of Namibia, that they should not be south of the 60th parallel.
UNTAC, however, did not have any structures in the north of the country on the 1st of April. During this month, about 300 guerrillas were killed by the South African troops and their surrogate forces, the Southwest African Territorial Forces and Kufut. The casualties on the South African side were much less. The evidence before international ballistics experts proved that many of the dead guerrillas were rounded up and shot at point-blank range.
Evidently, they were stationary and they were executed from behind. There are no frontal body wounds below the neck, where in a battle situation you would constantly have wounds throughout the whole body, not concentrated around the neck and the head.
My main task was to get this exercise back on track, because I was seriously concerned that the events in April would stop the whole exercise.
The fighting in the north of the country during April was much more intense than ever before. As could be expected, all eyes were turned on Marty Ahtisaari.
What I think is absolutely number one priority at the moment, in my discussions with the Administrator General when I return back, to get a ceasefire and end the killings in the north, and try to contain the situation so that we can proceed with the implementation of 435 in an orderly manner.
Around this time, there was the meeting, the tripartite meeting as it was called, as the group was called, that was to take place at a place known as Mount Icho here in Namibia. It is at that time that South African Foreign Minister Botha, I think accompanied by his colleague Magnus Malan, the Minister of Defense, the South African government set up, the Angolan delegation and the Cuban delegations came to sit at Mount Icho to discuss a number of issues, and this crisis was also picked up there. Around this time, at our level with Mr. Ahtisaari, that is the churches now, we were discussing the role that we thought as the churches we could play. And we were telling them that we were prepared to avail church facilities that could be used by UNTAC to accommodate planned fighters, so that then from then they could, in conformity with the arrangements that were reached at Mount Icho, these people could be brought to these centers, and then from then they could be taken back by Onchaka to southern Angola, so that stability could be reached.
The peace plan calls for the declaration of complete amnesty and the repeal of all discriminatory legislation by the Administrator General before the arrival of the Namibian exiles.
That was my brief. That is what was required of me in terms of Resolution 435. There may be lots of other discriminatory measures, but which would not affect free and fair elections, and they have not been touched in this population.
The Administrator General found 80 laws altogether which did not conform to the letter and spirit of United Nations Security Council Resolution 435.
Well, we are extremely satisfied that the amnesty is a comprehensive amnesty. Now, what we'll have to continue to survey and follow is the application of amnesty, that nobody is harassed, intimidated, up to the repatriation. This is a very important element as well.
The first real success of the United Nations in Namibia, and a sign that the process is back on schedule, was when the first planes with exiled Namibians arrived on June 12, 1989, on schedule, according to the provisions of UN Security Council Resolution 435. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees and its local partner, the Council of Churches in Namibia, the CCN, was in charge of the repatriation of nearly 44,000 Namibians. They established an elaborate system of 6 reception centers and 65 secondary reception centers across the nation to temporarily accommodate the returnees. In addition, a tracing system and food rationing program was also set up to cater for those returnees who needed it.
It is good to be back home. Our coming home today is a harbinger of the demise of over 100 years of colonial subjugation. It is the love for the motherland and the conviction in the ability of our people to one day free themselves from colonial bondage that has kept alive and burning in us the candle of hope during the long years of exile. Today, as we arrive back on the soil of our forebears, the land of Maharero, Ipumbu, Mandume, and Vetboy, we remember the fallen heroes and heroines of our revolution.
I gladly grant to my colleagues in UNHCR and the Council of Churches my gratitude for the job well done. It was interesting exercise because there was an attempt to politicize that. And there were accusations against us and mainly us in a sense that we should not have utilized CCN, which was clearly politically biased, the argument was. But my counter-argument was that, first of all, we have to utilize an entity that has an operational capability. Secondly, majority of those who return must feel comfortable with that organization that organizes that repatriation.
The unpleasant part of the repatriation process, however, was the arrival of ex-SWAPO detainees from Lubango in southern Angola.
After many years in exile, some of which we spent unfortunately in detention in the notorious SWAPO prisons in Angola, we are happy to be back home at last.
Regarding the ex-detainees, Gurirab announced that some of them were hardcore South African agents, while others were innocent. But the rest they were not sure about.
We have discovered, upon the return of the ex-detainees, that some were tortured and that some of the officers charged with the responsibility of gathering information from these persons have taken the law, so to speak, in their own hands and have carried out brutalities against these persons, for which we very much regret.
The ex-detainees organized themselves in a political consultative council, which claims that hundreds of Namibians were still detained in neighboring countries. Artishari accepted the challenge and dispatched a team to look into the alleged missing persons. The commission reports back.
The mission found that there were no detainees in any of the alleged detention centers and other places which it visited in Angola and Zambia. The laborious process of checking and rechecking the original submissions has turned up some 110 duplications. In other words, names appearing more than once. In addition, 484 persons have been identified as released and or repatriated. 71 individuals, including current SWAPO officials, reportedly were never detained. 115 persons are reported as or are suspected to be dead. 52 individuals could not be traced because of insufficient information such as a single name, nickname or nom de guerre, leaving 315 persons who could not be accounted for and for whom the search will continue.
We have complete evidence of those people who were indeed agents of South Africans and who have indeed confessed and whose account of their information to South Africa have led to the death of thousands of Namibians.
The best way, in our judgment, to deal with this matter is for the community leaders, churches, traditional leaders, SWAPO officials, other political leaders, to deal with this matter. We do not believe that public arena is the best place to seek to resolve this issue, to seek to heal the wounds, and to promote the campaign of national reconciliation.
Arriving on time for the registration was the president of SWAPO, Sam NUJOMA, after almost 30 years in exile. By week 26 of the implementation of the peace plan, most Namibians who were eligible to vote have registered themselves for the forthcoming elections. Many of them were South Africans who could register because of their work in the colonial administration, because they were soldiers in the occupational force, or had Namibian parentage.
It is unjust. I have been living in Tanzania for 10 years, 8 years in Zambia, 10 years in Angola, but I never voted in those countries. Why these racists who are denying their own citizen majority in South Africa the right to vote, and they wanted to come here and vote here? This cannot be allowed. It is unacceptable.
This was a point on which all the political parties were agreed that people over 18 of Namibian parentage should be allowed to vote. This applies not only to South Africans, but coming from South Africa, but also to returnees coming from Angola, coming from Botswana, and coming from Zambia. You can't make an exception.
To many Namibians, this was one of the troublesome compromises of the process. It meant sharing the hard-won right to vote with the citizens of another country who themselves have been voting in Namibia as well as in their own country all the years before the implementation.
We want to live a free life. We deserve to live a free life. We want to live a free life.
These coup food or counterinsurgency elements appear to be acting outside recognized police norms and are frequently conducting themselves in a manner which give me great cause for concern.
During the 16th week of the implementation, the United Nations Secretary General came to Namibia to assess the progress of the peace plan for himself. Kufut was one of the problems on his mind.
Really, I consider that this president of Kufut is a kind of a ghost which terrorize the people in the northern part of the country. That's what I have felt. And what I thought that as there is a kind of, I don't know, psychosis on this question, I think it would be useful for all of us, and mainly for the local government to eliminate this cause of concern.
During the 27th week of the process, the Administrator General finally gave in to pressure and disbanded most Kufut members in the Southwest African Police. Most of the instability during the campaigning was not caused by Kufut as an entity, but by violence between supporters of opposing parties. In an effort to stop the intimidation, UNTAG produced a code of conduct signed by 9 political parties which participated in the elections. These parties essentially undertook to respect everyone else's right to campaign freely in any part of the country and accept the result of the elections.
And I am happy again to say that one very important achievement has been the adoption of the Code of Conduct, which has been signed by all the major political parties. The Code states that an essential part of free and fair elections is freedom of political campaigning.
The Council of Churches also made an effort to reconcile the political parties.
As Namibians who are aiming for one purpose, which is the independence of the country, that they should, even when they differ in their election campaign, should try to do it as Namibians, political leaders of Namibia.
According to the registration proclamation, all parties contesting the elections on November the 6th have to obtain 2,000 signatures and deposit 10,000 rand with the Supreme Court. When 10 political parties registered themselves on September the 26th for the elections, the battle lines were clearly drawn.
We defeat the enemy at the battlefront, and tomorrow we must defeat the best one tomorrow. We must defeat them.
On the next day, as the polls opened, and for 5 days thereafter, Namibians streamed to the polling stations in their thousands to cast their vote in the elections. They flocked from their homes and stood for hours in the simmering hot Namibian sun to cast their vote for the party of their choice. By November 11th, the final day of voting, 97% of those who registered had voted.
In fulfillment of my responsibility, under paragraph 6 of the proposal for a settlement of the Namibian situation, and in accordance with Security Council Resolution 435 of 1978, I hereby certify that the electoral process in Namibia has at each stage been free and fair, and it has been conducted to my satisfaction.
There was no significant distortion of the popular will. The elections were certainly as free and fair as ones I've experienced elsewhere in established democracy.
In my view, well before the election, it was clear that there was one sector of the population for whom this election could not be free and fair. And those are those people who are working on farms, who had such a problem in having access to information, free information, independent information, to political parties, and who were taken often to the polls by their bosses, and in many cases were wearing the colours of the party that he supported.
National Patriotic Front of Namibia, 10,693. 10,693. SWAPO Democrats, 3,161. 3,161. SWAPO of Namibia, 384,567.
After the reading of the election results, the first milestone in the birth of this nation was achieved. It was no surprise that SWAPO won the elections. Although the former liberation movement gained only 41 of the 72 seats in the Constituent Assembly, instead of the much desired two-thirds majority, the victory was widely celebrated across the nation. Amidst all the jubilation and celebration of the defeat of colonialism and apartheid, quietly, the remaining 1,500 troops of the South African Army pulled out of Namibia. As provided for by Resolution 435, UNTAC also officially closed planned bases in southern Angola.
The question I would like to ask is, what does this represent? We talk about lessons to be learned from what happened elsewhere in Africa and elsewhere. And I suppose when you talk about national reconciliation, perhaps you would think in terms of you producing a constitution, which is going to serve as a sort of a living constitution, something around which we could gather, something which we could regard as our own, in the sense that the constitution of a country is something which can bind us together. And it's one of the things you can add to the name Namibia, which actually unites us. If you say Namibia, all of us regarding, irrespective of our different political organizations, we will respond to that.
Although Resolution 435 falls short of determining the dates of events after the elections, the first elected representatives of the Namibian people entered the Tendon Palace a few days after the election results were announced. These men and women sat in the chamber together to write the fundamental law of the country for the first time without any foreign interference. Some had started the long and demanding struggle for liberation together, but separated along the road. 3 of them were part of this joyful rendezvous.
I was very proud that at the end, these sons of Namibian people were under one roof to decide the destiny of their country. The thing they started many years ago. And I'm glad that they are all alive, to sit together. It was a really emotional moment for me to see all of them together. We met and identified problem areas. You must first have your game plan. So what I have done is to meet all the leaders privately to discuss with them what their bottom lines were, what their problem areas were, so that thereafter I would go to SWAPO and inform SWAPO that these are the problem areas we're going to face. And those areas we identified as areas of material difference were only three. That is the executive presidency, the type of the house you will have, whether bicameral or unicameral, and electoral system. Those were the only main sticking points. We were genuine negotiators, and we were very tough negotiators. They were, on the other hand, very tough negotiators. Towards the end, I must say, it was a blessing in disguise that you had a man like Derek March in that committee, because he just put a question to us. You want the executive president, convince me why you want that. And we had to talk to him, and he listened, and he listened. And then he said, okay, now I'm ready to discuss.
The question, therefore, is that we adopt this constitution by consensus, and thereafter the leaders will make their statements. Any objections? If none, so ordered.
It has been a great beginning for our emerging democracy. This great beginning holds forth bright prospects for a happy and a constructive working relationship among the parties in the future.
It must be clear to all that the Constitution is not the end, but only the beginning. It provides for the birth of a new nation. It provides for the rules, the guidelines that a future government must open.
Today will go down in the history of Namibia as the most important day second to the 31st of March 1990, the Independence Day. To build a new nation in a prosperous country, taking into account that a pluralistic democratic society demands a constitution which will entrench the principles of equality, freedom, unity, democracy, justice, and collectivity.
We accept that the preamble should reflect the historical content of the birth of the new Republic of Namibia and the aspirations of its nation. But we do not accept that the preamble is the place where political views or disputable historic facts are reflected.
In the process of negotiating, bargaining, and hammering out this constitution, the Namibians developed a special Namibian way of resolving internal differences and contradictions. The method is, in the national interest, to remain level-headed, respect one another, be flexible, and strive for the best for your country. It is important that some of our neighbors who are involved in internal conflicts which appear insoluble carefully study the Namibian approach and adopt it to their own circumstances.
The sacred mandate of our Constitution is so powerful as to deeply inspire loyalty. It is also so demanding as to require special loyalty of all public servants in the exercise of public policy and administration. Our government, I have no doubt, will be bound to a multi-democratic constitution which speaks to, by, and for the entire Republic of Namibia.
Let there be no doubt that through this constitution, we are about to launch a model African state, a state through which we shall help create a new Africa, an Africa free of colonial and imperialist domination, an Africa proud of its heritage and conscious of its destiny. Let our constitution be the gateway to that forward-looking Africa, an Africa in charge of its affairs, an Africa in which the top priority on its political agenda is the socio-economic development of all its people.
A new state is about to be born, and at long last to take its rightful place among the community of nations. We gather in Windhoek tonight to celebrate the culmination of the struggle for national dignity and independence of many generations of Namibians. Numerous lives have been sacrificed in seeking the goal which has now been reached. The whole world, especially Africa, rejoices with Namibia. What is a triumph for Namibia is a triumph for Africa, and indeed for the principles that are enshrined in the Charter of the United Nations.
The season of violence has passed for Namibia and for the whole of Southern Africa. We extend a hand of friendship to our new neighbors. Together we should seek to build a constructive, and mutually rewarding relationship between our two countries. Good neighborliness is in our mutual interest. I, Sam NUJOMA, do hereby swear
that I will strive to the best of my ability
that I will strive to the best of my ability
to uphold, protect, and to defend as the supreme law,
to uphold, protect, and defend as the supreme law
the Constitution of the Republic of Namibia,
the Constitution of the Republic of Namibia. It is heartening for the Namibian people and I to know that our independence has been achieved under conditions of national consensus and international unanimity. The impressive presence here today of so many world leaders and other dignitaries is a clear testimony to the fact that Namibia's achievement of independence is an event of great world importance. For us, this is yet another reason for celebration. I'm indebted to the Namibian electorate for giving its SWAPO an absolute majority, thereby enabling it to form the first government of the Republic of Namibia.
is a very great and special honor, as well as a privilege, that His Excellency the President has deemed fit to delegate to me, as the Chief Justice of Namibia, the pleasant duty to administer the oath or affirmation required to be taken by the members of the Cabinet in terms of Article 38 of the Constitution. Say, I affirm. I affirm. Will you raise your right hand and confirm the text you have just recited? Hendrik Witboy.
So help me God.
Congratulations. Minister Andimba Toivo Yatoivo.
We want to live a free life. We deserve to live a free life. We want to live a free life.
Minister Sipo Kamutenya.
We want to live a free life.
Minister Nahas Angula.
I do affirm.
Minister Nico Messenger. Minister Galchuke Chirianga. Dr. Nikki Yambo. Will you raise your right hand?
I affirm.
Minister Ben Amakila. Take the oath and say, shall help God. Minister Dr. Libertini Amatila.
I affirm.
Will you raise your right hand and confirm the text?
I affirm.
Congratulations. Minister Marco Arsico.
I affirm.
Minister Dr. Otto Herigo. Minister Herr Barnekow.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we are gathered here today to celebrate the independence of a much cherished part of Africa. This is indeed an historic moment for all Africans and a memorable occasion for all mankind. From the depths of my heart, I congratulate President Sam NUJOMA and the valiant people of Namibia who have undertaken an heroic struggle for freedom and the dignity of humanity. We are proud of the Namibian people and their leadership. President NUJOMA has given a shining example of courage, vision, and statesmanship. The success of this struggle bears witness to the lessons of history Fighting for a just cause with determination, faith, and patience is never in vain. Africa has always set the example for unity and mutual understanding. We are confident that the Namibian people will remain faithful to this great tradition. They will stand united in their struggle for economic and social development.
When I did my last supervisory act in supervising that the Administrator General left the territory, I think it's high time that you and your cabinet supervisors that I will finally leave.
They say all's well that ends well. But for Namibia, this is just the beginning of the rest of Namibia's history. As all the foreigners leave, for the people of the Namib Desert, there are serious challenges ahead. The challenges of reconstruction and development. However, even the boldest efforts are doomed without a concerted effort to reconcile the different parts of the nation. A nation born out of the ruins of a devastating war and a century of divisive foreign rule. Praise goes to the United Nations for what it has done for the people of Namibia. But recognition must be given to the Namibian people themselves for writing one of the most democratic constitutions in the world.